Good afternoon. Please welcome back Ernst-Jan Stigter.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's the energy? Good? Still good? Welcome back. Welcome back to the finals of this formal part of the program, this upcoming Fire Chat. Our next guest is in the business of enabling startups and scale-ups to achieve more in the Netherlands and beyond. He leads an organization whose focus is to strengthen, connect, grow, and most of all, internationalize the thriving startup ecosystem of the Netherlands, and as a gateway to the rest of Europe and the world. So please welcome His Royal Highness Prince Constantijn, Startup Envoy of the Netherlands, to come to the stage. Please give him a warm round of applause. Welcome, welcome. Have a seat.
Thank you.
So, Constantijn, the Dutch culture is one of innovation, where we have had an impact on mostly every industry, from agriculture to infrastructure and what have you. But what do you think is the core of why that is?
I think the Dutch like to challenge authority. So, and that's really important, right? You always have to ask the why question. Why am I doing this? Which is really annoying, you know, your kids, whenever you say, you're just going to do that, so why? And you have to start to explain, and then, and so other cultures might be more prone to accepting authority. We don't. And so that thing is one. Two is, if we didn't have innovation with this country, it would have been 1/3 or only half of the size. So we had to kind of grow our country because we were not strong enough to conquer other lands. We had to build our own, so we basically conquered that on the sea, which is, so that's another one. And I think that has democratized our country a lot, because you typically would have an overlord that protects you against other armies coming in or looting your lands. We had the sea. And you can't go to an overlord and say, well, can you protect me against the sea? But he can't do very much, right? So he had a whole system of civil servants and engineers basically protecting us, which is a completely different society than a more feudal system. So I think that, and then we had windmills that were early early industry, which allowed us to grow a fleet which was much bigger than we would usually have as a small country like this. So the number of innovations have really driven the Dutch quite early on, but I think the most important is the continuous why question. The why question, yeah, that's a good one. And when you just would zoom in a little bit on technology and innovation, and the role that it has played over the years towards the Dutch success, what do you think the impact will be moving forward on technology and the Dutch component to it? Well, I think I actually don't know about that. I think it's not so much the technology. I think it is how do you apply the technology, and now scale is really important. So it's really what's your ability to scale something fast. So growth is really important. All over the world, we're developing the same things. All over the world, we have the same technology. So it's only those that are able to, either because they connect better, they collaborate better, they kind of cross-pollinate between sectors, that their innovation will accelerate. And then it's about execution. And so the Netherlands is very good in developing concepts and finding solutions to difficult problems. We're not always that good at scaling it. So you'll find that there are many solutions in the Netherlands for problems that we didn't even think of being unique. I mean, for water management, for also in agri-food, we just do it at home, but we don't think of scaling it to, for instance, new markets like China. Yeah. Now, in your capacity, Constantijn, you are the special envoy of Startup Delta 2020. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program? Yeah, so the program started because there was a hypothesis that in the Netherlands we're doing much better and much more than people really knew. So we had to go out, tell the world, we had to shout a bit louder. I think some people went to Silicon Valley and they heard that you have to fake it till you make it, and you have to kind of scream about how big you are and how good you are, and then people will start to believe you. So that was the basic hypothesis. So they thought that, this was the government, by inviting Nelly Kroes to, on that job, that she would go around and she would use her Rolodex and kind of start selling the Netherlands. So she said, I'm not going to be cheese lady for the Netherlands. I'm not going to go around and tell the world how great this all is, because she wasn't really convinced that it was actually the case. And she definitely didn't want to do that for the government, because she was fed up with government. She said, I'm fed up with bureaucracy. I'm done with the European Commission now. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to Silicon Valley or New York. So she's working with Merrill Lynch and with Salesforce and with Uber. So that was kind of her future. And then, but she did like startups. I mean, she did like the young people innovating new technologies, all that kind of stuff, but she felt that she was not going to go work for the government. So eventually we talked to her and said, well, what would it take for you to do this? And she said, well, I want to control over the part of the policy. I want to take it out of The Hague. It has to be in Amsterdam, because that's the flagship brand of the Netherlands. And I want to hire my own people. So most of that was dealt with. So she started, and started was really selling the Netherlands, but also connecting what was there. And it was a 1.5-year program, supposed to stop, had to be temporary. It was just a kind of a Kickstarter, and that was it. And she didn't want to go on. And but then people came to her, entrepreneurs and also investors, and said, but it's not good enough. There's lots to be done still. And then they approached me and asked if I could continue. So I had a few demands. I said, I want to take it out of the government, so it has to be independent. I want a bigger mandate. I want to work for entrepreneurs and accelerators and for a lot of the innovation hubs in the Netherlands, and not so much for the government. I think that was really important. And I want to have my independence. So, and that was okay. So I got that, and we worked very much on the system for 1.5 years. So things like knowledge transfer in universities. How do we attract more foreign investment? How can we make sure that our visa system is better so that we can attract talent in the Netherlands? All of those kind of things, very much on the system. So less with entrepreneurs, but more with these institutions. And now we're in the next 1.5 year of iteration. We're going to do these sprints. And now we're going to work much more with the entrepreneurs, supporting them in their internationalization, and supporting also teams in universities that have high potential for scaling, have really good technologies, help them to actually to scale, and basically bring our network to bear for their support. And also become much more data-driven. We actually found that we didn't know what we were doing. So we didn't even know, how many startups there were. Different reports saying, one would say something like 2,500 startups, the other would say 5,000 startups. And we didn't know in which phase of development they were. We didn't know if somebody would ask an investor, would say, well, can you show us the 20 best AI startups in the Netherlands? We wouldn't know. I mean, we could go to maybe you guys, or we'd go to other people, or go to an accelerator. We just basically ask around and say, can you give us a few of those companies? But they get so many of these requests that they wouldn't respond much. So we didn't really know. So now we're working with Deal Room to have and by mid this year we hope to have 100% of the Dutch ecosystem mapped with relevant information about their age, stage, the technology they're working on, financiers, who has funded them, all of these kind of things. So
more data-driven.
Much more data-driven, and eventually now it's for supporting us. But we are working also with the Kamer van Koophandel. So eventually we hope that those kind of the two kind of data sets can be merged, and we hope to give it to the public, so that in the end, it's not up to us to matchmake between an investor and a startup, but that just leave investors to find startups and vice versa, or startups to find each other, and let it kind of self-organize.
In your capacity now, working with all these startups, what has surprised you the most in working with them?
What surprised me is that some of them are so focused on either a product or technology that they forget to ask some really, really basic questions. and so somehow, you have to go to find an investor. So they run to an investor without really understanding what their market is, and they're solving a problem. So you apply a technology to a problem. And it's a really important problem. But to ask yourself the question, but who's going to pay for it? You know? And how are you going to scale this? What are you? Are you an agency? Are you a consultancy? Are you a software company? Or, you know, and these questions just don't come up. And I think it's mostly, maybe also because the concept of startup is now so strong, everybody thinks that they're a startup. But obviously, startup needs kind of some kind of a replicable business model that scales. And it doesn't mean that you're starting a business yet. I mean, that's fine, but that's not what we're about. So that surprises me. What also surprised me that there's so much interesting things going on which we don't know about, you know, and the people that are supposed to know don't know about it either. Because, you know, I went to a certain region in the Netherlands where we do a lot of high tech. And you ask them, can you show us the best of your stuff? And you see that, you know, they present, you know, really good companies, you know, or nice technologies. Good companies and technology, not always the same thing. And I spoke to some investor and said, well, but you know, well, you shouldn't have seen all those guys. You should have seen that, and that company because they're going really fast. But they're not in. They may be based there, but they have their clients all over the world. They already have an office in the US. They may be producing in China, and nobody hears of them. Those are the really good ones. So the guys that don't come to us, and the girls that don't come to us, they are the really good ones. Yeah.
Excellent. And now talking about these subjects, like the challenges and the barriers that these startups are facing, what's your view on, you know, the more corporate world, let's say the more mature companies versus the startups? What's your point of view? Are we supposed to work more closely together? Should we be more having a startup mindset? What's your view? What's the beauty of a startup that you would suggest?
I think those are very different questions. Yeah. I think should you work with them, or and what's the difference? I think yes. I think, and as you know, I mean, we're just discussing it. Your values about being open, and I think we all now acknowledge that within your organization, you probably don't have all the brains, the best brains of the world. You might have very bright people, but you condition them because of your culture and because of your processes and all that. So a lot of innovation will be coming from the outside. And if once you acknowledge that, and once that becomes part of your innovation strategy, you'll organize for it. I think where things go wrong. People, you know, in companies, they think startups are nice things, and then, you know, and you put a few bean bags in your you know, you have an open office, like you will have a very nice open office, and you think that everybody comes running in your door because you are such a brilliant technology company, and everybody will want to work with you. But the first desk, you know, they ask, you know, who can I approach for a certain question? Say, well, we don't know, or you have to go there or there or there. So they get lost in the company. The corporates typically don't pay their bills in time, and that could kill a company because then you might be the launching customer. So a lot of things that make it difficult to collaborate. And I just always think, well, if it's really an integrated part of the strategy of a corporate to work with startups, then you organize it well, you understand what startups you want to work with, and you signal that to the startup. A lot of startups are not ready to work with corporates. So it's up to both sides to want to make it work, and then it can work really well. But it's really, how do you capture the ideas from outside the walls of your company, and how you're able to apply those within you, with your clients, within your processes, or with your project suites in a way that is going to help them grow, and you do that in an honest way. You know, very many of these startups feel that if they work with a corporate, their idea will be stolen, and you know, all their hard work goes to waste. Mm-hmm. And it's not always wrong, and it's not always the intention, I think, of the corporate, but it's because someone in the top thinks it's really important to do so, but the middle management might feel differently, especially if you provide a service that is in some way competing with a service that you're providing yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's, I think it is strategically really important, and it can be completely complementary. You have the agility of a startup, the ideas, the flexibility on one hand, and you know, the corporate will be capitalized, and they have the clients, they have the networks, they know how to optimize processes. So you have these two, and they could be fully compatible and complementary, but it's that kind of where they connect is, mm-hmm. That's where you have to put your energy.
Makes sense. Now, Startup Delta concludes partnerships with corporates to ensure better access for startups to these potential clients and investors and technology providers. Today we have the leaders here in this audience, in this room. of many established businesses. And if there would be one thing that this audience could learn from a startup, what would that be? What would you say that is something I would like to see in every single company?
Well, I don't know, but the good thing about a startup is if you to break into a market, you have to do a few things much better than the incumbents, or very differently. So I think that mindset is important. So you have to either understand the customer much better, and provide a usually superior service, or you serve a market that the incumbent doesn't see. I mean, actually had this conversation recently about Uber. They were serving a market of chauffeurs, so it's a B2B company basically. So they were serving a market of chauffeurs that were not served before. So they were not, the people were not taking more cabs, but just suddenly there was another option for them, which was cheaper and better. And nobody saw it coming because it was so expensive to become a cab, and there were no new entrants. And suddenly, there seems to be a whole untapped market of people that are willing to grab their car and start driving people around. So if you, that kind of mindset of looking where there is an untapped market, that is something that the corporates might even not find interesting, because you've been driven down this funnel and you're serving a customer with a product which you incrementally improve all the time, and you're driving down that path that you might not know that there's a big highway there that you're not servicing yet. So those are things you can, I think learn, or at least as long as you expose yourself to these ideas and meeting those people, you might pick up some of those ideas as well.
Makes sense. Now, with the fast pace of business today, only going up, the speed is just going up all the time. In addition to tools and technologies, a company needs to have a culture that embraces change. And that's a diverse need. And constantly being in a learning mode is what we believe is what the future will be all about. And at Microsoft, we call that the growth mindset. Carol Dweck has written a book about that I recommend to you to read. And what, in your view, Constantijn, when it comes to growth mindset, how important is that?
I think, well, for a startup, it should be everything. As I said, you have the technologies or the services are being developed everywhere in the world. I was working at Slush, is a big tech conference in Helsinki, and everybody's doing the same things. Everybody's revolutionizing education, healthcare, SaaS services. I mean, everybody's is in that space. And why is one surviving and the other isn't? And it's probably because one is just focusing on how can we scale this so much faster? How can I go into markets? Because that's what it's all about. Once you guys pick it up, the idea, you can go much faster than they can because you've got everything laid out already. So they have to think about that speed and agility. And if you don't have that, then it's going to be very difficult to compete. In software, it doesn't really. You can't just stay in the Netherlands. You have to start from the first moment on. You have to think about how you go abroad. And actually, a very interesting company in the Netherlands, which they're not in the Netherlands. They don't even have an office, which could be a good example for you guys who don't have an office at the moment.
Yeah, very good.
They're called GitLab, and they're competitors of GitHub, and they have 200 people all over the world, and they don't have an office. They do meetups, but they've managed to organize themselves for speed and agility, and you see that actually can work. And they also have very strong corporate culture. You have to have something that binds you together. But if you look at, and I spoke to the founder, and talking about this growth idea. That he set himself a really, really, really high objective. He said, I IPO in 2020. And he put it on his website. And I asked him, why do you do that? Why do you limit yourself? Why do you limit your options? And he said, if I don't do that, I will go back and focus on what I think is realistic. And if I work towards a target of IPOing in 2020, I can get this whole company, everybody, to work harder towards that objective. And he could have put 2020. He could have said, you know, we'll be worth 50 million, or we'll be worth 10 million in 2020. And everybody would be working to that goal. And so sometimes it's also about kind of, you know, really setting yourself that objective. And sometimes it works against your culture. I think the Dutch culture is not like that. You know, it's not kind of promising the world. Everybody will tell you, yeah. You kind of calm down, be rational. And that's not a supportive mindset in an exponential world.
Yeah.
So.
Makes sense. And one of the things that triggered me very recently was a report about the happiest people on the planet. We just briefly elaborated on it before, and it seemed that on the planet, in the top 10, we have 7 Western European countries considered inheriting the happiest people on the planet. And that's great, because being happy is a good thing. At the same time, it drives a degree of convenience and maybe lack of appetite. Things are good enough. So what I hear you saying is, the example you just mentioned is, we should aim higher in order to innovate faster or to have more impact. Would that be something you would sympathize with? Aiming higher, being bolder?
Well, you can aim high, but if there's no urgency, why we?
Yeah, why
So,
to go after?
Because actually, we've achieved what most societies want to achieve, right? And maybe you can say that certain ways we are actually maybe now less integrated. There's a bigger wealth disparity, kind of, it's at least growing. So those are issues we need to deal with. But on the whole, our society indeed is very happy. We don't have this kind of urgency or drive. And why would you start a company, have no social security, have no health insurance, nothing, and basically to drive your idea and run all the risk and then build a company and then get HR nightmares? And you know, why would you want to do that? If you basically had a 4% unemployment rate, everybody can just get a job. And it's very different if you are in a country like Israel, where there's an existential drive, you know, to there's no market, so you have to go abroad. You have to find markets abroad. You have to scale. First, they had to innovate to get water. Then they had to innovate to get food, and now they're innovating in all kinds of ways. But there was a really, really strong drive in Europe. You know, I mean, in the Netherlands, why would you? You know, so here it really is a choice, either because you feel some kind of real pain that you want to deal with, or you find some beautiful technology that you want to develop, or and there's a lot of lifestyle stuff too. People just want to be independent and do their thing. And you do see that actually in the Netherlands, people sell out really early. So they like to build a company. You know, you have 20 employees or something. You have at a valuation of 15 million. Sell out. You know, start something new. Why go for all the hassle of starting and scaling and all that? So I think that is probably one of our biggest challenges. You know, and I actually gave an interview once, and one of the comments I got back is that, so you're saying that our social welfare system is bad for entrepreneurship, and that you basically the harsh conditions, like in Silicon Valley, the conditions are really harsh. You know, the housing prices are ridiculously high. The public services are crap. The healthcare is unaffordable. You know, so you have to
There's
go
a burning
forward.
platform.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's absolutely a burning platform. So the assumption was that I kind of had said that, or that, you know, we had to get rid of our kind of very comfortable social welfare state to get people to become more entrepreneurial. And I don't actually say that. But I do say that it's you'll find more entrepreneurial drive if there is urgency.
There's urgency, good. So what do you think companies can do to encourage their employees to embrace change or urgency? Is there any advice you could give?
Well, you can go nearly broke. That kind of changes the drive and the urgency. I mean, companies like, your partner company Nokia at the time, you know, how they've reinvented themselves has been kind of, when there's that existential feeling, then yes, then you will have to do something. But I think it's for companies, it must be less difficult. I mean, you have your quarterly reporting, and you have all the kind of measurements. So there is a kind of clear indicator. You know, you have your KPIs, and you can drive against that. It's more about how do you open up. So it's not about kind of how do you create that drive. I think how do you open up and let people exploit their talents within the company and not do that at home. If you allow enough space for them to develop their ideas, not to shoot them down immediately because they don't fit the company, and invest in those people. I think that's the challenge, and also allow people from the outside in. And so how do you change your company from being very proprietary, very closed, to very open, and actually how do you share the value that you're creating with those outsiders? I think that's the more difficult part.
Now, talking a little bit about disruption and as a method to create appetite for change. Education is a very hot topic. We all know that skills for the future are critical to capture the jobs of the future, and we have a long way to go in Holland for that. We see a lot of good initiatives happening, but it's very fragmented still. And the education system itself, you could say or argue, needs some disruption too in order to do things differently. We will be short of teachers, we will be short of, well, there's many, let's say the sky isn't painted that blue, you could say. And I've learned that in Singapore they have done some nice experiments to create a kind of a shock effect in the classroom. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, they went fully digital, and yes, Singapore is slightly different, right? It's basically run like a company, and the executives don't have a balcony in the norm. And it's relatively top down. But indeed, one of the things, the fun things, was that they actually forced the schools to send their kids home for a few months or a few weeks, I don't know exactly, and so that they had to find ways of teaching those kids through internet and through distant methods, which was, I think, very innovative, because they had to do it, and they managed, and that changes the mindset with the teachers. I think there are Dutch, I mean, this is again the urgency, right? If you look at all this, the benchmarks, the Dutch education system is really still up there, like our healthcare system and all that. So there is a limited sense of urgency to change this. I think most parents will feel much bigger sense of urgency than many people in education themselves. I mean, you know that our kids are not being taught coding. We're not being taught how to deal with social media, how to deal with information, and I find that really, really shocking, actually, because you have, all of the to be trained with new media. If you look at my kids, they're being educated like I was 30 years ago, and they sometimes even have the same materials, and so it means that the publishers or the people that are developing the materials and the methods for education are kind of are really stopping a lot of the innovation that already happened. All over the world, we're seeing wonderful new education method, new schools that really focus on getting the kids to, because kids are innately curious, but we kill that, right? We don't ask the kid, or we don't build on their curiosity. No, we say, okay, now stop asking questions, shut up, sit in the class, and we're going to put a lot of knowledge into you. If you see the stupid knowledge we put in those kids, and how often are you actually using that? So instead of looking around the world and looking what really good methods there are and applying that, and we're faced with a system that produces really good general outputs, but I think it is in need of, I don't know if you call it disruption. I always think that's a bit abrupt, but I think definitely we need to implement some of those methods that are out there and are producing really good results.
So in that sense, we should continue to challenge authority and keep fighting for a better education system in that sense.
Yeah, and I think what's really important is that our teachers should have a much higher status. I mean, the Finns have done it, and it all shows that it's all possible. It's all a decision, right? So if you think our youth is our future, and if we know that the Netherlands is a knowledge-based society, then you would think that investing in education is, even if you double the budget, makes more sense than doubling the budget of healthcare. Because I mean, it's just, I mean, I'm not a politician, and I'm not supposed to comment on these things, but I really do think that it's there where we need to invest, And if our kids run around with a device all day and there's nothing, the only thing they're using it for is basically checking their agenda of school, if that's the only way we are able to use that device in classrooms, I think that's deplorable. And not that I say that I don't believe in these iPad schools, because then it's just the technology, but it's the whole way that you engage with information, that kids get to understand what information means, where it comes from, what the motives are of the people that are actually providing that information, that kind of thinking. That's really, really important. And if we don't want our kids to only be consumers of that content, we want them to be producers of that content too. So why aren't we doing much more of that in schools as well? I think it's all there, it's possible, it just needs a few decisions.
Just a few.
Just a few decisions. It's not difficult. And you've been a sponsor of Future NL, and the stuff is there. We're now reaching a few thousand schools, so it's possible. And there's no reason why there are still people exiting the education system with incomplete reading and writing skills. That's still happening. Yeah. And we think, oh, that's a statistic, it's 10%, who cares, 10%. Well, 10% of the people, a lot of people that we're not giving opportunities to develop themselves further. So that's something you should be really upset about. But why is nobody upset about this? And actually, it's something you can solve. We got people in the system. We're a completely over-organized country. So when you're born, you are registered. You get someone who supports you. You have these, how do you call these offices? It's too long ago for me, but where you go with your kid. No, nearly. Consultatiebureau. Yeah. Consternatiebureau. Yeah. That's the first time you go there. That's a consternatiebureau. I say, geez, what do I do with this child, right? So very early on, you can see if a kid is building up a deficiency in reading and writing, you can deal with that. Yeah. Yeah. For you, the consternatiebureau was when it was born, right? It's called a clinic. Yeah.
Good.
So all problems we can solve.
Yeah. Good. Are there any final thoughts, Constantijn, that you want to share with this audience when it comes to innovation, startups, breaking through, and making Netherlands the icon of digital transformation?
Yes. What surprised me, it is all about decisions. It's all about decisions you and I take in our daily lives. And you talk to politicians, and it's a whole group of, actually just a sum of many, many people. And we're all keeping each other kind of locked into little commissions, and then there's a little association and another association, and we do a koepelorganisatie on top, and everybody's spending a lot of time talking to each other, but we never ask the question of who we're doing this for. So for instance, I'm working for startups. My primary objective is to get an entrepreneur, to give him a much better opportunity to grow, scale the company. That should be my objectives. And if the government sets up a fund, and then provides so many conditions so that it gets very difficult for a startup to actually access the funds, it's all understandable from the government's logic. But why are we doing this? We're doing it for the entrepreneur. And same in schools. Why are we doing this? We're not doing it for the teachers. We're not doing it for the parents. We're doing it for that kid. And I think we should think more like that. Think about why are we doing this? And then it becomes very clear. It means that there's a lot of stuff we shouldn't be doing anymore. We should focus on only a few things and give people the space to develop themselves. And it's not that difficult. This is what I find is nice about my job. It's actually not that difficult. But you just got to do it, right?
Just got to do it. Thanks very much for sharing your perspectives. Please give him a warm round of applause. Constantijn, thank you very much. Thank you. So that was inspirational, I hope. And I hope the entire day brought some really good value to you. I hope you have enjoyed the day so far. And thank you again for joining us today. I truly believe that there's no better time to start or continue, if you will, our transformation, your transformation. And we would love to partner and be your trusted partner to help you do things differently. And you can be assured that we are highly committed to help you do things differently to achieve more. So please join us for our reception later on. Looking forward to seeing you there and to continue our conversation moving forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.